My interest in the Melbourne University funerary mask, the Egyptian funerary mask, resonates because my practice is interested in ancient civilizations and how they memorialise the dead. I've had 2 St Vincent Hospital artist in residencies. My first residency in 2012, I worked with the patients and their families. I did socially engaged projects within the Hospice daycare centre 2 days a week. I used the materials only from the hospice, so I collected the floral oasis foam, and as you can imagine, a lot of flowers come into a hospice setting, and I recycled that foam and created a series of crematorium vessels. I placed those crematorium vessels throughout the space, so over the year-long residency, it collected the dust that was floating in the hospice over that year, and there was a millimetre of dust at the end of that residency that had accumulated in those small vessels. So I really love that idea of the absence of the body and how that floral oasis foam, as it collected the dust, it transformed from a really vibrant green colour, but as the dust landed on it, it sort of transferred into a bronzed sort of antiquity. I reimagined the vessel that holds the body in water cremation, which is this sort of stainless steel tube, and I thought I wanted to introduce stainless steel into the exhibition through the use of a chocolate fountain. So that chocolate fountain then was filled with squid ink, which represented the communal body. So it's also a very pungent smell, because I'm also, as an artist, interested in smell in the gallery space, and because that smell is so corporeal, it's come out of the body of a dead creature. It really filled that space and it smells a bit like blood and bone, so you got a sense of death in the space. And then I encouraged people to use a pipette to suck up the squid ink and then collect that communal body and then choose one of these portals that were displayed on the ground on a HAZChem matting that's used in hospital settings to absorb the bodily fluids in operating theatres. This body of work came out of an exhibition earlier this year called Art, Death and Body Disposal that was curated by a interdisciplinary research team at Melbourne University called Death Tech, and they presented artists with a provocation: how will the deceased be buried in the 21st century? And we were invited to respond to that provocation. And I produced this body of work inspired by water cremation, but I was also influenced by ancient death rituals and how ancient civilizations still communicate with the dead through mourning rituals. These works here, called Death Squad. A squad is a group of squid. These are the abstractions of the Squid Ink sack. And what I was imagining was how could the wet bits of the water cremation process, which actually separates the visceral, the wet parts of the body, which through that process it's siphoned off as fertiliser, and then the dry bits are left behind and ground up and given back to the families. I was imagining what happens if the families asked for the wet bits, and how would they collect that part of the body, and how would they ritualise the disposal of those wet bits. It makes the public think about the legacy that your body, the disposal of your body can give back to the earth, and thinking about death in a productive and positive light, and if you're having those discussions about death, it's much more sort of uplifting to think about, how you can give back to the earth that sustained you through your life. I'm really interested in the use of smell in artworks, and so as an extension of the use of squid ink in my practice, I've also been working on a series called Sensory Archeology, where I'm infusing the gallery space with the smell of people close to me and how that smell triggers memory of those people. For instance, I did in a recent show at Gertrude Contemporary, I did a project called the Reuben vase after my father, where I sculpted with a needle his profile into an Aramis deodorant stick. For me, it was a reimagining of the death mask. Although, do you see two faces joining together, or do you see the vessel, the vase in between? So often the funerary mask was kept in the family home as an object of ornamentation or decoration. That sort of resonates really well with this sculpture called Family Group. So here we see the vessel stacked up on top of each other, and it starts to represent a figurative form. And in terms of the family group, you get a sense that there's like a child, a mother and a father joined together, made up of the stacked up vessels that you could potentially imagine the cremated remains of a dynasty or a family or relations to stack up and make the figurative form. So then they also become like a memorial to that particular family group. Whereas the funerary mask is just the mask. You don't get a representation of the body. Here we get this sort of representation of a family or a figurative group. In today's culture, it's not unlikely to see the urn on a mantle of a fireplace of a beloved family member. So I really like that relationship between making it less of a taboo by including the human remains still within the family home, or a memento mori of that family member through the incarnation of a funerary mask in the domestic space.